Hello and welcome to the Let's Talk Azure podcast with your hosts Sam Foote
and Alan Armstrong.
If you're new here, we're a pair of Azure and Microsoft 365 focused IT security professionals.
It's episode 8 of season 4. Sam and I had a recent discussion around zero touch deployments of devices, a mechanism to streamline your end user device deployment by shipping directly to your users from the supplier. Here are a few things we covered. What is zero touch deployments? What are the business and IT department benefits? What is supported in Microsoft Intune? And how easy is it to get started?
We have noticed a large number of you aren't subscribed yet. If you do enjoy our podcast, please do consider subscribing. It would mean a lot to us for you to show your support to the show.
It's a really great episode, so without further delay, here's the episode.
Hey Alan, how are you doing?
Hey Sam, not doing too bad. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. It is officially August, which means it's holiday season. Weirdly busy but quiet at the same time. Lots of holidays.
Yeah, lots of holidays, and it's quite a lot of work to get done. It all seems to be starting, doesn't it? Again this month for us.
Yeah, exactly. Any new product announcements or anything interesting happened over the past week, Alan? Any name changes?
Not that I can remember. With the new announcement side of things, there's some new Entra technology side of things for networking and access side of things, which I think we need to do an episode on. But I've just got to get my head around it all because I've not had a chance to take a look at it.
It's not just the. I think a lot of people focused on the rename, right? But there's actually quite a lot of new functionality there, isn't there?
Yeah.
With it, so yeah, definitely 100%. Okay, Alan. So zero touch deployment. So let's just get started then. So what are zero touch deployments?
So zero touch deployments, from a device perspective, is the ability to configure and deploy a device without, in effect, IT touching it. So having the ability to get it shipped directly from the reseller, the supplier, the factory, straight to the end user, and without the factory or anything having to do sort of anything to it per se. So previously you could sort of do part of this with some of the window, the laptop suppliers like Dell, Lenovo, where they would deploy an image on there for you, specifically with your image, with all your software and that, and then ship it to you to then be built in effect. So it's like a sort of reducing the amount of time that you need to do, but then you in effect you paid for that time for that deployment. But this is using, from a Windows perspective, this is talking about autopilot and that being configured, and in effect, it can go straight to, instead of it coming straight to IT, it still could come to IT, but don't have to be opened. The device has to be touched, doesn't be turned on or anything. Maybe you need to attach an asset tag to it, but if you don't, it can go straight to your employee that maybe is a remote worker, so go straight to their home to be configured, and then in effect boots up and says, you're part of this organization, this device is part of this organization, please enter your username, password, or your credentials into it, and then it then gets built there and then on right next to the user. So, and that can be covered by, so I talked about sort of Windows and autopilot for Apple and Macs, or so iPads and iPhones and Mac devices. That can be done through sort of Apple Business Manager, and you can do it through for Android Enterprise. Android's slightly different, but we can talk about that later. But in effect, you can do it through Android Enterprise and Zero Touch, and you can literally just send a device out, and the user can then start using it within the time it takes to build, which generally isn't too long.
Okay, so basically you're saying that the device, it can technically just go straight out to the end user, They open it and it's effectively ready to go at that point. What would you, if you didn't have zero touch, what might be the process for an IT department to sort of get that machine set up?
So especially for laptops, Windows laptops, that would have to be built on site. You'd have to like run a config manager build or configure it so it automatically connects into Intune once you like do the initial build of it, and then it would go connect to Intune and then download all the software. And that's probably the more modern, closest to modern zero touch, potentially sort of semi-touch, I guess. But before that, you'd have like a gold image which have all the software on there, and then you'd have to deploy that via config manager or manually image it, and then manually config build the device at that point. And there's no sort of issue with doing that at all. There's just a lot of process there, or a lot of time taken to do those builds. If you are a smaller organization, maybe that time is okay, or maybe you don't have the IT department to do that. So you may want to increase that speed. But yeah, there's various things for Windows and for iPhones and things like that. You'd have to manually configure them on a Mac. Hook them up and then push config to them so they become provisioned, and then you wouldn't be able to like change any of the config really with it. So it was really like you had to get every device in, plug it in for 30 minutes to provision it, and then get the user to come in and do their setup with them, kind of thing. So it's definitely a more sort of in-person, on-site scenario, and we've kind of moved away from that. We've definitely moved to hybrid working now more than anything. So yeah, that's kind of what it was before any of this come in. And in zero touch sort of deployments have been out for a while now, and they've just been improving in their process, kind of thing, of what you can do.
Okay, so what you're sort of saying is that there's an inherently manual process that has to happen. If you don't have some sort of out of the box experience, and it also completely limits you to only delivering those machines to IT, right? So use the example of a remote worker. Maybe you've got somebody at the other end of the country. Maybe that person, doesn't come into the office once every 6 months or something like that. This means that device could be shipped directly to them. Obviously, like you say, you might want to put an asset tag on them and various other things that you might need to do. But you can allow that sort of that journey to happen like direct to the user, instead of having to bring it, build it, configure it, repackage it, and then ship it yourself for a second time, right, to that remote worker. So they can go direct and basically just open, connect to Wi-Fi and go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess in that sort of small savings around that is probably things like shipping, because they could be expensive devices. If you think about deploying a high-end laptop, Windows or Mac, and sending it, in the grand scheme of things, it's not maybe that much, but if you're doing it quite often, that is a cost to you where you'd pay, almost pay for that by the reseller to send it direct.
Yeah, and I've personally been involved with sending a very high specification laptop to Europe, fully tracked, fully insured, and it is horrifically expensive and takes a long time. So you're effectively absorbing a lot of that risk yourself. Instead of just letting the supplier deal with getting the machine to the end location. That isn't always the case, right? Full remote working organizations, they are they are there, but there is still a lot of hybrid / in-person working, right? So I suppose that specific benefit is maybe only useful for certain organizations. Could you just take us through maybe some of the other benefits to the IT department?
Yeah, sure. So probably a key part is that if you don't have in effect a zero touch mechanism to build these devices, when they break or when they need to be rebuilt, they have to come back to the office, to the HQ, wherever IT is, or IT have to go off and collect the device if it's going to site, etc. So with sort of zero touch, because in effect you can build it wherever it is, you can just in effect with remote wipe it, and it in effect builds itself ready, and then the next user can have it on that site. Or if someone's got a problem that it needs rebuilding and they're able to send a remote rebuild, then that can be done. And that is key, because the amount of support time for bringing it back, then running through that 40-minute, 1 hour, 2 hour process of getting it rebuilt in the time that you've got whilst doing other work, is gone, because it's basically remote wipe, it rebuilds, user logs in back to rebuilding itself, and it's up and running within a given time. It depends on how much you're deploying onto it and what some of the requirements are, but generally you could probably there's a turnaround of maybe 30, 40, maybe an hour's time, where if the user had to bring it back or you had to collect it, you might have a 3-hour journey just to go and get it, or to go to site to then rebuild it because you can't remotely do it. So there's loads of benefits there just in time, let alone if you do have to travel, then there's cost savings there in that as well. And kind of it is really around that remote support kind of thing. And one thing generally for sort of giving devices directly to users is I've seen that, or I feel this happens anyway, where it actually does, I guess, the question, but I feel like if you gave somebody a brand, if you gave someone an iPhone, say, or an Android device, to keep it fair, it could be that if IT have opened the packaging, had it open, done some, built it there and then, potentially made it a little bit, I say dirty, but maybe a few fingerprint marks on the screen where they've tried to do updates to it and things like that, or get it provisioned. They put they clean it off, but maybe it doesn't feel like brand new anymore, and then they send it off. I think the psychological view of that is that it's second, almost like second hand per se, and that maybe they don't, they will look after it, but they're less worried about looking after it, because one, it's not their device, so it's technically not their problem if it breaks. But there is that, don't get me wrong, users will look after it, but there is that form of it didn't cost me anything view of it. But if you send a device directly to them and they open it, it's like that feeling of getting a new device. Oh, this is my new device, IT or this business is giving me a brand new one. I must look after it because I've got something new. And don't get me wrong, this probably doesn't happen in most places, but it's the feeling, it is one of those weird and wonderful things that someone might look after it a bit more if they get something new. Same with a laptop, someone gets a brand new laptop that's not been touched, they tend to probably look after it. And I've seen in organizations that people have gone off and got laptop cases and things themselves because they want to make sure it's like looked after, because they feel like it's theirs. So don't get me wrong, if people are getting reused devices, they're going to have that still, that same experience that I was talking about originally. But when you're doing new deployments, things like that, it's just that sort of part to it.
Yeah, definitely. And these are devices that people interact with more than probably anything else sometimes in their lives, right? Single device, they have to use it every single day. So yeah, being able to, maybe make the operational saving of sending the laptop direct, which could then mean that they could have a newer machine instead of reusing one, because pulling one out of the cupboard and then shipping it across Europe might actually take more time and more cost than just simply sending them a new one, right? Just recycle and I doubt those economics work with high-end laptops, but I don't know what the average specification of a laptop in the enterprise is, but I bet it's not super high-end, that's for sure. So should we go through some of the sort of actual processes of zero touch? Is there a particular platform that you want to start with? Apple devices, maybe?
Yeah, start with Apple. So I kind of talked about before that in effect you have to use the Apple Business Manager. And there are some caveats around Apple devices. So in effect, how it works is that you're either Apple, if you're buying from Apple directly through Apple Business Manager, then it's straight, it's directly in, the devices turn up in Apple Business Manager for you to use Zero Touch for. But if you've got a reseller, you can set them up to in effect deploy or associate your devices with your Apple Business Manager account, and then they become part of your sort of Zero Touch or capabilities. So that's one thing. Generally, if they're not bought through a business reseller that can do that, or they don't support it, or they were bought from maybe the Apple store, but in effect not from on a business account, some of the devices can't be added into Apple Business Manager. And so it's mainly around Macs themselves. I don't think they can be re-added in. I think that's right, Sam, isn't it? I think some of the experience you've had.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so if Macs specifically, laptops and desktops, if you haven't bought them through an Apple, I'm not an Apple Business Store account, I think it's called, or something like that, because Apple Business Manager is like the bit that it goes into, and then there's a separate store basically for purchasing Apple products. So if you talk to your to your local Apple retail store, and obviously for larger organizations, I don't know how this works, but they'll set you up with a business account. They'll also link that with your Apple Business Manager, and as you buy directly through them, not through the web store and the retail store. It's like this whole separate area that you go to. If you buy it through there, those laptops go into Apple Business Manager and they can be supervised then. And if they're not purchased through that, they can never be added in. You can never get the same level of control with them. You can do it; it is possible, but it's a different out of the box experience. It doesn't. You have to install for Microsoft. You have to install Company Portal and do X, Y, and Z. I believe you can add mobile devices, but personally, I've never actually done that. The organisation that I worked with effectively just rebought all their phones and just did it that way instead, because it was effectively, it just made sense at the time, and it was easier basically.
Yeah, so I have done iPhones being re-put in. So in effect, they have to be in effect factory reset, but use a configuration tool on a Mac to in effect provision them into Apple Business Manager. So yeah, iPhones can be done. It does take some time. You have to do them one individually, and it takes in effect a flashing of the device. So it could take 40, 60 minutes per phone to do that. So once the devices are into Apple Business Manager, you can then choose which mobile device management MDM solution you want to then do Zero Touch. So it doesn't have to be a Microsoft product, but today we're going to talk about how Microsoft Intune sort of does it. So in effect, you create between the two, you create a Apple push certificate to allow you to manage Apple devices from Intune, and then you create a Apple Business Manager sort of connection with it, and that needs to be renewed every year, I believe, so that it does, because it has in effect a year certificate to be so that the devices trust that endpoint. So once that's done, you can then the device then synchronize into Intune, and then you can start to push a profile to them. So what things do they see on the out of box experience on an iPhone? Do you remove the location settings? Do you remove the create an Apple account? Things like that. in there. So once you've done that, and then you maybe push some Intune policy for them as as an MDM, that is it. And in effect, you can tag devices into policies, and then when the user gets it, whether it an old phone or a brand new one, as you sign into the phone, because of how sort of Apple devices work, they go to the Apple servers and see if they've already been configured or they're provisioned. So this is the kind of thing of, if you get a new phone or you get a second-hand phone and they haven't turned off the provisioning locks, activation locks on it, then you can't get into it. So in effect, as it does that, checks those activation locks, it then goes, oh, this is part of X company, brings down their profile and then says, right, now sign in. In effect, it then goes, right, okay, we're going through the general setup, and then it will take you to the the iPhone home screen, and then it will say, okay, app company portal's coming down, now sign in. You can't do anything else until you sign into that app. Once you've done that, Intune then starts provisioning the device with applications and everything. And then it's fully provisioned, fully supervised, and then the user can start going. And that process really, I don't know, probably takes 10 minutes, if that. It doesn't take long to get it going. And then all your apps start coming down and things like that.
Yeah, no, it is a really great out-of-box experience. You say connected to Wi-Fi. It says, hey, company name, and away you go, basically. So it's really very slick and very integrated. How about Android? You mentioned Android Enterprise earlier.
Yeah, so Android Zero Touch is a little bit different. In that, because you have multiple manufacturers in that space, some manufacturers, what do they do? They have their own sort of zero touch provisioning. So Samsung Knox is one. So you can use Samsung Knox to manage your zero touch deployments in effect. To do that, there are some phones that can do zero touch straight out of the box, and you can hook that straight up with with your phone reseller or your phone provider. They can in effect do that zero touch for you, but from what I've seen, generally there's a cost to that to get them to integrate, and quite a few don't do it. Especially, from what I've seen in the UK anyway. But outside of that, you can still do zero or semi-zero touch, I should say, for a device. So when a device boots up and you get the welcome screen, if you tap the screen 10 times, you then get a special menu that says, right, let's hook up the Wi-Fi and let's scan a QR code. And when you scan the QR code, it then starts the sort of zero touch process. So it's kind of almost zero touch, I guess. But once you do that, it then goes through the process and then manages the device. And in a similar way, it asks you to sign into company portal, and then starts provisioning the device. So I would say it's not as slick as Apple. But it's still, you still get the same result in effect for that.
Okay, and ultimately that's the most important part of it, right? Is to enable that process to be done fully remotely, right? So I've seen that happening as well, and yes, the Apple the Apple onboarding experience is completely seamless, right? But it's not simple, but it's a lot more. It's a simpler ecosystem, right? There's only one vendor, one company, right? So you can imagine that, the device support that's required for Android Enterprise, it does mean that, it does have to have some level of drawbacks, right? Just because of the support that's required. Okay, so we've talked about Apple devices, Android devices, Windows devices.
Yeah, so Windows devices is Windows Autopilot, and this in effect is a similar thing. So manufacturers now can, or resellers or suppliers can add your device IDs, your hardware hashes, in effect, into your Intune portal for you, so they can get that at the factory. Quite a few suppliers, I think, now don't charge for it because there's not really anything to it really. I think they probably grab all the hardware hashes anyway as they go through the process of being manufactured, so that they're ready to be distributed to the right organization environments as and when needed. But yeah, once that's in there, Intune can then deploy a profile to them, a deployment profile, and this could be determine whether they've got admin access and what applications need to be deployed, etc. And with Autopilot, you can also specify the user as well. So actually, you can say this user is going to get this laptop, so that when they turn it on and they connect to the Wi-Fi or the internet, it then says, "Hey, Sam, this is please sign in because we know who you are and we know what company you work for. So sign in." In effect, when a user signs in, it then checks everything. It gets enrolled into Intune, and then Intune starts deploying all the software onto it. And depending on what you want to get installed, you can get the process to wait until certain applications are installed, and then the rest is done in the background. So you might want to say maybe get Office installed and Teams, so they can get going with collaborating and working, and then maybe all their back end software starts deploying. So yeah, that's a really easy process. And again, with that, you can add devices manually, just running a script on the devices to get their hardware hashes installed, or grabbing it and then inserting it into importing into the back end of Intune. One thing you can do if you've got all your devices already in Intune, as part of the profiles, you can check a box to say, if I've already got devices in Intune and they've got this profile, import them automatically for me. So previously, I think that's been out for some time now, but previously, when Autopilot came out, you had to go to every device or run a PowerShell script on it to collect it all, to get them in. So that was quite difficult when you remote devices, things like that. But now with this checkbox in effect, it will automatically provision them into Autopilot for you if they're in Intune. So it's quite easy to get your estate Autopilot ready. And like I said, remote wipes, things like that. As soon as they rebuild and come back, then they go, "Hey, this is a X company's device. Please use their credentials to sign in."
Yeah, exactly. And I've also been through that process as well, and it's very similar to the Apple out of box experience, right? It presents the company name, asks you to log in with the company details, and away it goes. It's very it's very streamlined from that perspective. I think the only one thing that I want to call out there is that you can add and remove those devices at will into your portals, right? Unlike with Apple and Mac, that has to be done basically from the factory, right? And it can't be changed after it's done. So Windows does give you an element of flexibility there for that.
Yeah, that's a good point actually. So if you wanted for Apple, I know we're kind of jumping around a little bit, but for Apple devices, if you wanted to resell a device, sell it off, or it's the employees decided they're leaving the organization, would like the phone, and it's maybe an older version, you're happy for them to pay for it, contribute, I don't know, whichever process that might be, to in effect buy it off the business. You can remove it from Apple Business Manager, but then you can never add it back, even manually. Correct. It is excommunicated from the Apple Business Manager, all that service. That is it. So it becomes lone wolf at that point.
Yeah.
And kind of with Autopilot, if you give it to that device to another person, it goes to another organization. initially they won't be able to provision it for any other organization because it will come up. It's probably worth pointing out that with Windows, it isn't a security mechanism, autopilot, like the Apple version, Apple's Zero Touch is. Because in effect, with the Apple Zero Touch, it doesn't matter what you do to that device. Every time it turns on, it's going to say, I'm this company. So, from that perspective, if someone steals that device, it is. I know that with Apple devices, you can tell Apple, and it will just be dead anyway. But even if they get it, they just come up saying, it's this company's phone, put in your details, and you can't go any further, so it doesn't matter. But with Windows 10 and Autopilot, Windows 10, Windows 11 Autopilot, today at least, you can't change it, but you just have to contact Microsoft to, in effect, remove the Autopilot configuration, or if you know where it came from, then ask them to remove it. So there's a bit of a process there for the organization to remove it from their Autopilot sort of setup within Intune. But it doesn't stop it from working. And if any of the hardware sort of changes within a device, it's a hardware hash in effect, it then has a new hardware hash at that point. So it needs onboarding.
Yeah, great. So, Alan, what do organizations need to get started? Is it simple for small and large organizations alike to get going?
Yeah, so some of it is getting access to some of the tooling. So from a device management and setting up the configuration, things like that, you need Intune, Microsoft Intune. So you need the licensing for that. But a lot of SKUs now that you can get all have Intune now. So generally most organizations have it. And it's not that expensive to add, individually if you don't have full licensing. For Windows Autopilot, you need Windows 10 or 11 Pro as a minimum. Windows Home isn't capable of it because it's, in effect, they are designed for home. And for Android, you just need, in effect, to set up Android Enterprise sort of setup, and that's free to set up. It's just a bit of configuration. Just needs sort of Google accounts that you can use to do it. You don't have to have full, it doesn't have to be a Google Workspace account or anything like that. If anything, it has to be like a personal account in effect, tied to an organization's account. And for Apple, it's really getting the Apple Business Manager set up, which can be tricky to start off with because you've got to get quite a lot of information to validate who you are. I can't remember what some of the areas are. You have to get a certain piece of information, which is quite hard to get. I thought there was. I can't remember what it's called.
You have to get a DUNS number, I think.
Yeah, it's DUNS and a few other bits, isn't there?
Yeah, but the last time I did DUNS number, it was instant. It wasn't like you didn't have to wait for it at all. But it can be. I think it can be complex if you've got a relatively new organization or different types of organizations, like potentially non-profits and charities and things like that. Don't quote me on that. But to be fair, I used to be involved in quite a lot of app development, and you needed the same thing for that. And years ago, that actually did take some time to come through. But the last time I did it, it was literally instant. Yeah.
Yeah, the last time I helped an organisation sort of set it up, it took them a couple of weeks because they had to speak to certain people. Yeah, emails had to go from the chief exec or the finance officer, things like that to approve, and they were off on leave and things like that. And
I think it needs like a company director and or shareholder to do it. So, like you say, you in a larger organisation, just explaining that can take a couple of weeks.
Getting their time, as well. Could I just borrow 10 minutes? And for what?
I just want you to click on this link to get this number for me. Is that all right? Yeah. Cheers, thank you.
Yeah, that's not phishing it at all, is it?
No, exactly.
So it's a little bit more difficult, but once you've got Apple Business Manager and hooking it up, it's relatively simple. The only things around Apple side of things is, like I said, it's those Apple push certificates and any of the synchronization things that all have to be renewed every year, and they should be renewed because otherwise you can cause devices to be not managed by Intune anymore because of they expired. But just renewing them every 6 months ahead of time or 9 months, it's absolutely fine to keep it going.
Yeah, and the process that Microsoft's got within inside of Intune it tells you exactly what to do, right? It's very simple.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, first time may take a little while just to get understand what you
just
need
to work
and
out
having all the
without
accounts and everything. But after that, it's like a 5-minute process. Upload something to Apple, download the new certificate, import it into Intune, done.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. So yeah, that's kind of it. There's a fair bit of configuration you need to do to decide how you want a user's experience to be, and then looking at the the deployment of applications and things like that within Intune. But that's more of a sort of general mobile device management process there. So yeah, I don't think there's too much more there. And really with Android, like I said, the hookup to Intune's fine. It's then just the zero touch side of things, depending on the supply. Samsung, or the manufacturer, say Samsung, have Samsung Knox that is quite good, that they can in effect put their serial numbers in, and then when they boot up, it says, "Hey, Mr. Customer," or "Hey, company, please put your details in." So yeah.
Cool. Sounds great to me. Thank you very much, Alan. That was a really good overview. And are there any other episodes that we've had that are kind of aligned to Zero Touch?
Not necessarily directly to Zero Touch, but one I wanted to call out was season 3, episode 12, where we talked about the new Intune suite. So it is an add-on to the Intune licensing, but there's definitely a few things in there to help support remote devices and things like that around the because there's in effect remote help in there to help you your remote desktop or remote do session control on those devices quite easily, and things like that. And there's a few other bits in there that would help with I think it's got some analytics for Windows, enhanced one, so you can see when devices are maybe failing, things like that, or there's some problems, so preempting problems, I guess, before they happen, so you can save users having any downtime.
Cool, great.
Yeah. Okay, so Sam, what's the next episode?
Yep, so next episode we're going to be talking about Microsoft DevBox, which is a Azure service which can host a workstation for you in the cloud. And what this can be really powerful for is, it allows you to have sort of fully managed boxes in Azure that can have your set default apps and configurations loaded onto them. So for repeatable environments for your team members. And one of the really good things about it is that you can scale beyond the performance of your local machine. So if your developers like to have thin and light laptops and they don't want to be lugging around a massive, really heavy laptop, hey Alan, then but they may still be limited in terms of the memory capacity of those laptops and things like that. So that allows you to scale past this. Obviously, there's insanely fast networking in Azure as well, so you can get benefits in terms of just remotely connecting to a box and using its internet connection instead of your local one. So yeah, I'm going to take us through the features, the benefits, and the reasons to use the solution.
Cool. I think that's the final puzzle to the AVD Windows 365. I think it's in that sort of family, isn't it?
Yeah, then we'll have to have like a showdown episode of the three of them.
We already had that. We've got to add dev boxes to it. Okay, great. That sounds really good. So, did you enjoy this episode? If so, please do consider leaving us a review on Apple or Spotify. This really helps us reach more people like you. If you have any specific feedback or suggestions, we have a link in our show notes to get in contact with us.
If you've made it this far, thank you very much, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Yeah, thanks for listening. Bye.